This is Build Your Difference, a podcast created by Blue Artists, a brand platform with one goal: to help great visionaries like you build impressive brands. Every month, we'll bring you insightful tips, knowledge, and compelling stories from successful entrepreneurs and the Blue Artists team on how to create and market a winning brand that does more than just launch a new product or service. It starts an ongoing conversation. Because you're not just making a brand, you're making a difference. Let's start building.
Okay, so but listen, we have learned some lessons in terms of like how Branddesk works since we launched on May 1st, so May, June, July, whenever this airs. We have learned some very important lessons, and I want to share with you just a few of the lessons that I think were really kind of potent, that we had to kind of learn real quick and then implement into the system. And one lesson really specifically was, when Branddesk launched, we had on every project and every request, there was one sort of chat conversation thread. And this is similar to if you and I like to bounce back and forth with using Fiverr and Upwork as sort of competitor examples. And on those platforms, when you are involved in a project, there is one conversation thread. So you basically have the ability to privately message the person, or you can communicate with them in a sort of a message thread that anyone who you bring into the project can participate in, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we launched with that. Okay, that's how we launched on Branddesk. But what we learned was that because Branddesk has a different structure fundamentally, because we have clients who are working with producers, and then those producers are also working with team members, we started to realize that, and I know this sounds so obvious, we started to realize that the nature of the conversation that the producer would be having with the client was fundamentally different than the way the producer would be exploring strategies and concepts with the team. And we needed to sort of split those conversations into their own private threads, so that when it's time for the producer to talk with the client, it's in a structured environment where the producer doesn't have to worry about the artist interjecting or accidentally delivering a draft or deliverable too early or too soon. Like it's an environment where it's just the producer, just the client, and the producer can manage that entire experience. And then a different environment for where the producer can then manage the experience for the team members, letting them know, here's the client's feedback, let's talk about this, let's dissect this. Different team members are all pitching in ideas and concepts, and everybody's sort of collaborating, but that kind of ideation process, that kind of collaborative process, the client doesn't really need to be a part of. The client is just waiting for the deliverable. Just give me the deliverable when it's done so I can tell you my feedback, And I got to tell you, that was an oversight on my end. I mean, I take responsibility for that. When we launched, I did not realize that we needed to split those up. I didn't realize that was going to be an issue. I learned the hard way. I saw clients getting confused. I saw artists jumping into the chat and submitting drafts well before they had actually been totally vetted by the producer. I saw clients, complaining that they didn't want to get notifications every single time somebody was chatting in the conversation thread about an idea they had. But ultimately I learned from clients that, we really just want to be updated when it's time for us to jump in and give feedback. And it seems so obvious to me, but I didn't, that was an oversight. And so we fixed it.
It's a learning curve for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. It is. And, I guess I try to choose my messaging well. So, but I also feel like, I'll be honest with you. It absolutely was a learning curve for me. Especially like when a lot of what we've been sort of using as our frame of reference are other platforms that literally they don't have to worry about this because they're not taking that extra step, that extra level of structure when it comes to the experience that their users, they're kind of like, look, here's the conversation thread, do what you will with it. Whereas that doesn't really work for Branddesk, and we learned that, the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on there a couple of times, of course, and for, reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, I remember reading something about the way the conversation should work between producer artist, the producer client, that the artist should confer with the producer first before sending work off, drafts off to the client, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so kind of going on that, we would, speaking with the producer, we would agree, okay, let's get this project. The project I'll have a draft done by, I don't know, Monday, right? Mm-hmm. And then send it to producer first, just give a quick check on it, and then off to the client. So now I'm used to, of course, like we mentioned, the whole Fiverr Upwork thing, obviously used to wearing all those hats of being your own kind of producer, artist, everything. And so there's no one else to go through. So when Monday comes around, Monday 8 a.m., I'm submitting it, and it goes straight to the client. And so now I'm submitting it, but I'm submitting it first to the producer. And then I realized, well, technically I sent it in on time, but if for some reason the producer is, who knows what happens in their lives, they go AWOL for a day or two. Well, now the client won't get that work until Wednesday, Thursday or something. So
whenever the producer hands it over.
So technically it's late, but it's kind of not, and then are you going to get a disgruntled client because we told them it was going to be there Monday? And so I had I'm trying to remember which case it was. I can't quite think of the details off the top of my head, but I got something in on time based on what I had told the producer, but I did not see any follow-up with the work going to the client. And I'm like, oh crap, the client's going to be where's the work? You said Monday. So, and I don't, I'm not wanting to overstep my role there, but my first instinct is to keep the client happy, so, and all along I'm kind of keeping in touch with the producer as much as I can, and I just send off the work. And that's a good lesson of, now we're adding 2, 3, 4 persons to the mix of all this, that I need to remember to give myself, 2 or 3 days out from my normal, so if I tell the producer Monday, I probably want to be having this thing finished by Friday. So the producer has the weekend, to do whatever they've got to do. You know what I mean? So it's little things like that.
That is a good point. And that's a part of the learning curve. That is a good point. I think, in splitting the conversation threads, what we've done is we've also sort of tried to make sure that the expectations of the artist are specifically between the producer and the artist. And so, for example, like in the old way, where the conversations were all merged, if the date to get this thing in was like, let's say Monday, it's up to the artist to get it in on Monday, because it's time stamped when the deliverable is uploaded to the chat. It's time stamped. Everybody can see it was delivered at this time. Done. But in this new way now, like, okay, maybe the producer and the artist have an expectation that hey, the producer says to the artist, hey, I need this in by Monday. The artist goes, okay, I'm going to get this in on Monday. But maybe the producer did not provide that same expectation to the client. Maybe to the client, they say, hey, we'll look at getting this to you Tuesday or Wednesday. So that the client is like, okay, so the producer's like, okay, I need a little time to make sure I received it, reviewed it before I send it off to the client. But the artist isn't really a part of that conversation. So like you were saying, you don't really know what kind of conversations the producer having with the client. I don't really know.
In one case, I was having almost a daily back and forth with producer, and then getting on with the work. Work's finished, or at least draft one's finished, and submit it to the producer, but after a week of constant back and forth, now suddenly I'm not getting the immediate responses back from the producer. And of course, they're going to have like 5, 6, 10 projects going at once, let's say.
Sure.
Yeah. And something you said a second ago made me, I think it was when you were talking about how, the producer and the artist might decide with each other that, okay, you're going to submit this on Monday, but the producer and the producer might express to the client a different deadline date. But what I noticed was happening, this is probably before some of these changes went into effect, was producer and I would confer. I would say, I can have this done for you by Monday. And I would see in the main chat, where the client could see the chat as well, that the producer would relay the same message that I had. So the producer was telling the client, he'll have it ready on Monday.
Yeah.
So now I've got to have it ready on Monday. And after a week of like the producer and me back and forth, like boom, 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 suddenly I submit the work for it to be there on Monday. And now I'm not hearing anything from the producer because they're probably tied up with some work over here, over there. And that's when
in the conversation thread, did you see any other conversation happening once your work was submitted?
I don't recall that. Beyond the the client saying, okay, this is great, thanks, that kind of, and then there might be a comment from the producer saying, there needs to be, let us know your feedback or what have you. But then basically once the client has communicated that they are give thumbs up to the work, that's kind of where it ends. So
it's just that whole process of everybody being able to see that one conversation thread. It just ended up making things really more confusing than they needed to be. And that's because it's like, okay, you've got a bunch of cooks in the kitchen, right? But there are no clear lanes. So it's like, okay, it's like a traffic jam or something. And so, with these improvements where we split up that conversation thread, you'll probably notice this, like you may have noticed it on probably your more recent projects, but you'll definitely notice it for sure moving forward. Like you'll notice that when you go in to chat in the conversation thread of a particular project or a particular request, that is labeled team conversation. So it's the only thing you can see as an artist is the team conversation. You cannot see what the client is saying. You have no idea. And this is good because it allows you to only worry about your relationship with the producer. That's it. It's the only thing that matters to you is your relationship with that producer. And if the producer needs something in on a certain time, you're giving it to that producer at the time that they've requested it, but you don't have to worry about how that's being handled on the client side.
Right.
And it's great because it keeps you more focused. It allows you to not have to, worry, oh my God, what is the producer saying? You don't have to worry about any of that. But it's also nice because God forbid, the client, have very strong feedback or has a sort of impulsive reaction, which does happen every now and again. You don't have to see any of that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be exposed to some of these tantrums that some people want to have.
Poor producers.
Yeah, you can just rely on the producer to come back and say, okay, well, put it this way: the client wants to see it a little shorter, or whatever the feedback is.
They can give you the G-rated version of the note.
Yeah.
But I think that is I think that is a good idea though, because there can be a back and forth between producer and artist that will make total sense to the two of them, that if the client were privy to, it would just confuse the bejesus out of them.
Right.
And when they get confused, that's when concerns start to pop up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah. And I'm telling you, me personally, I saw that play out in a few situations, and it was just an unforgettable moment for me because I just did not anticipate that kind of thing. And in some ways, I think I may have had a little bit of overly optimistic thinking of how like everybody would just come together in the chat and just be honky dorky, But no, you got to have different communication streams because the whole point of all this is to create efficiency, and it should be efficient for you as an artist to just get the details from your producer, do what you got to do, turn into the producer, and move on to the next thing, and not have to worry about the client communication and any of that. And so this split, I mean, my goodness, it's such a simple design shift, but it's really impactful.
Oh, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
To the extent that you're going to have artists, producers, and what have you coming from other platforms where, as I've mentioned before, we've all been tasked with having to hold on to all the different, ropes of producer hat to accounting hat to artist hat. It's hard to let those go.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Build Your Difference. If you'd like to learn more about how Blue Artists can help you develop a distinguished brand that inspires and engages a growing audience, then please visit us at www.blue-artist.com and be sure and subscribe to our monthly podcast for the latest tips and trends in brand development and marketing. And remember, you're not just making a brand, you're making a difference. Start building yours today.